Welcome everyone to Maine Woodland Owners Ask the Forester program. This is a chance for you to ask all the questions you might have related to your woods. Here with Harold Burnett, our Land Trust Forester with Maine Woodland Owners. I'm Jen Hicks. I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach. And this is part of our virtual online or virtual forestry information sessions that we do mostly in the winter. Although it's also a way for us to reach people who are as far away as Israel. So this is a benefit for all involved. We're really glad to be able to include as many people from all over the place who have land, have a connection to Maine woods. And this is a good way to deliver good information. Hopefully it will help you feel comfortable and confident in your woodland management. So today, Harold's here to talk about or answer your questions, really. I don't think, Harold, you had anything in particular you wanted to talk about, but he has been a consulting forester for over 30 years at this point. He's been our land trust forester for the past 2.5, almost 3 years. And he manages all of our land. We have over 7,000 acres in fee and over 3,000 in easement. And he has been getting us kind of on track with our best practices. So he's got a lot of obviously on the ground experience, both as a consulting forester, but in a way, kind of a land manager himself, and dealing with similar issues that a lot of woodland owners face when it comes to doing the best they can to manage their land. So he comes with lots of different interesting perspectives. We have a new person arriving, Amanda. We've already gone around and had everybody say hello and where they're calling from and where their woods are, if they're not the same place. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Amanda Dwelly. I'm in Rockport, and I just have about 8 acres of land and 6 acres of woods that I'm just starting to take care of. So just really basic questions at this point.
Terrific. Well, it's great to have you. So Harold, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'll be keeping track of people as they come in and let them in. And but the floor is yours.
Great. Well, good morning. Glad you guys could join us. This has been a kind of a busy time for all of us, trying to get ready for winter and the like. But anyway, I guess I've got some questions I'll throw out later if that are curious for me. What sort of brings you here today? What interests you? Anyone can fire away at will. Doug, why don't you go ahead?
There we go, unmuted. I purchased this woodlot in July. It was cleared and it's in reforestation mode. And I've got some instructions from the former owner, but I'm not really certain exactly. I'm not a forester by trade or by background. I do have some ecological background, but so I was wondering, how to approach developing this reforestation project.
So tell me what you mean by cleared. How many trees were left when you bought it?
Few,
really, on 80 acres.
It was so about 35 are in hay and about 40 in
okay, yeah,
woodlot. You probably are familiar with Max McCormick.
Yeah.
I have his property.
Oh, you do? Okay.
So I don't know if you know what Max did, but he took down some sick trees, like all of them.
No, I've walked the boundary, your southern boundary, because I've been on the Sebasticook land.
Yeah, they're taking down a bunch of trees now. I'm very concerned about how much they're taking down. They're taking down, I think, way too much.
Yeah.
I called Tom this morning, but haven't heard back yet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can check.
You know the property, so I'm a new guy, and I've got that to work with, and fortunately, I'm still healthy to get around. But there's I just want to know what kind of tips, what things I should be doing. Every now and then I find some empty empty tubes.
Yeah,
Want to know when the best time is to fertilize. Max left me with a bunch of urea.
uh-huh.
And I know that's important. I've been clearing away shrubs nearby and trying to keep things open, still finding things, still finding the four corners for that matter.
Yeah, so to be perfectly honest, patience going to be your best ally for quite a while. And I mean, it's trees regenerate. I mean, from what little I've seen of that property, it is regenerating. And yeah, I think I did see a few tubes out there that I never looked in them to see if anything was actually growing, but presumably do you know what's inside those? The ones
Well,
that,
there's red oak, white oak,
okay,
sugar maple, red maple, probably some bur oak, I would think.
yeah,
Some poplar, big tooth and
quaking.
quaking.
So I'm guessing he's striving for, or he was striving for creating more diversity than what was there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And
I'd like
you
to
know,
encourage that and see what I can do about it. So should I be planting acorns or
well,
purchasing slips?
it would depend, I think, principally on what's coming in and how many of them. So, let me just sort of back up for everybody else. So what it was cut, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
My records show 13 and 20.
Oh, okay, okay. And so from what little I've seen of it, there's quite a bit of regeneration. It's up anywhere from 5 to 10 feet tall. Is that
That's where you
reasonable?
are, yeah. The more recent stuff, obviously not so, but yeah.
And anyway, so the question is, what do we do with it? Because there are some scattered big trees, but not many.
Right.
And most of them, I think, might be pine. Is that of the big ones?
Evergreen. There's pine and spruce, balsam, some cedar.
Okay.
I found
So
one.
you've got, so you have somewhat diverse seed source in the conifers. It sounds like he was planting, for those also others, Max McCormick is a retired forestry professor from UMaine. So he's and a frequent author in Maine Woodlands newsletter. So you probably have seen his name, but so this was his woodlot in Unity. Yeah, I think patience is your principal ally. And then to the extent that you feel that there might be places where regeneration is insufficient, and what that may be is one, just lack of seedlings, or maybe a preponderance of dense ferns, or I don't know if you have invasive shrubs like honeysuckle, barberry, that not sure, or you're
Oh,
muted.
not too many.
Oh, no,
Actually,
okay.
I do walk quite a bit and move about, and I haven't seen a lot. The most prolific, actually, I've got an area that's got an awful lot of poplar in it. I'll be thinning down
Okay.
with
Yeah.
a PCT.
So what you can do in the short term is sort of monitor the regeneration. So for example, in an area where you have all these popple sprouts, and if you're looking to do something different, you might want to focus on those areas to the extent that there might be something else that's maybe shorter, because the popple is going to grow very rapidly.
Yeah, they're 8 to 10 at this point. Yeah.
And because they're all supported by this incredible root system. And so those areas you might want to, focus on keeping down the aspen sprouts until something better. I mean, assuming that there's something better underneath there. But if you're just going to cut them down and pray for something better, you're probably going to be disappointed in those dense popple areas. Then other things that you might want to consider is that the white pine, which is coming in, is going to be susceptible to an insect, the white pine weevil.
Yeah.
And the problem is that, trees like to grow vertical and straight, but the pine weevil likes to feed on that leader, that terminal leader, kills it. So then the side branches assume dominance and you've got a fork. And then it happens other years, and then there's another fork. And you end up with these big old, well, there's all kinds of names for them. Cabbage trees, wolf trees, they're just these big old things that don't have a straight stick in them for more than 1.5 feet. So you can focus on treating for pine weevil, which is essentially, an insecticidal treatment in the spring. And because it's the larvae that are feeding on the leader. And so getting them, and that's something that, if you're really focusing on it, you're going to want to continue with the insecticides treatment until you're up anywhere from 16 to 20 feet. So it'll be a few years, because it'll probably put on, 1 foot to 1.5 foot a year. And actually with the insecticide, it may have actually do better. But anyway, so it's something that is very common in that situation. The white pines turn into bushes.
Right.
But anyway, I think for the most part, if and then you can be as selective as you'd like. If you're out there and you have a preference for oak over hemlock or something like that, and if you come upon a situation where you've got 2 small trees and one of them's hemlock, one of them's oak, you can advantage the oak by just clipping off the hemlock. I mean, that's something that is pretty labor intensive over the entire area. But if you're out there walking every day or something with the dog and you've got your clippers, you can do you're not out there for hours and hours, but you can advantage it a little bit. But for the most part, the species composition has probably pretty well been determined by what's come up and what Max planted. Anyway, I don't have any suggestions for you beyond the notes that he left for you in terms of what his intentions for the seedlings that he has inside the tubes. And again, for the rest of you, this is a seedling that's growing inside a tube that's transparent and 3-4 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
4 inches in diameter, and it's to keep deer browse. It's to limit the deer browse. They stand 5 feet tall, and anyway, so once they shoot out the top, hopefully, I mean, the deer will probably browse them a bit, but they probably won't kill them outright. So anyway, that's the purpose of the tubes. And so you'll get your oak and your sugar maple and anything else that he's planted in there that survived. They'll help revegetate and diversify the property. So anyway, yeah, those are some thoughts.
One last one is along
Sure.
the property. There's some high density balsam. I just, I assume I need to thin them. And what's the recommended spacing for that?
Well, spacing is generally dependent on size. The larger the tree, the wider the spacing, the smaller the tree, the narrower the spacing. And so if you're dealing, well, so, I mean, if typically in a plantation where they would be planted, you're looking at anywhere from 6 to 8 feet spacing between any tree. And, but on the other hand, I would suggest to you that of all the trees on your property, the balsam firs are probably going to have the least potential. And so if you have limited labor supply, you might want to focus on releasing the oaks, the pines, the spruces, sugar maples if you have them, over the fir. Spending a whole lot of time on fir and aspen and red maple is not going to get your best return. If it's what you've got, I don't mean to denigrate it completely, but if there's better species and you get a greater diversity by focusing on the other ones, then I would. But as I said, if in a plantation you're looking at 6 feet apart to 8 feet apart for a seedling, and then as things grow, you want to just make sure that they're getting full sunlight. And that generally also means that they're not bumping up against their neighbors. I mean, physically bumping into their neighbors. So.
Thanks.
Yep. Well, appreciate the questions, Doug. Anyone else? What brought you here today?
Hi, this is Todd Katz. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, hi, Todd. I didn't even know you were here.
I just joined. I was on another meeting.
Okay, great. Yes, I can. Yeah.
Yep. So for me, it's I'm just new at this. I haven't really done a lot of management. I had a forester come through. I have about 850 acres in tree growth and had a forester come through, and I have a plan.
Where's your land, Todd?
It's in Surrey.
Surrey. Okay.
Yep. And I have, the plan, it was kind of clear cut before we bought it, that acreage. So I have some time, before I'm really supposed to harvest anything. But I keep thinking about whether it's cost effective, frankly, for me to be doing some kind of work on the trees right now, whether it's money well spent for me to do it if I want to, basically be in a positive cash flow situation, not all investing.
A couple of, how heavily was it harvested?
Well, I think it was clear cut virtually.
Okay, how many big trees are out there?
Not too many.
Okay. How much of the conversation with Doug did you hear?
I just tuned in 3 minutes ago, so I'll say
Okay.
nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. Why, did you guys do this already?
Somewhat similar.
Okay, you don't have to do that with me again. That's okay.
Although you have a much larger acreage. So when was it cut?
It was cut, I want to say 17 years ago, 18 years ago.
Oh, okay. So this is, and how tall are most of the trees now?
I would say 16 feet.
Okay, okay,
Mostly, looks like mostly quaking aspen to me.
okay,
Apple.
okay. And why did you buy the land?
I wanted to enjoy it, like ski through it and walk on it, and manage it.
Do you live nearby?
I go back and forth between Surrey and upstate New York
Okay. So
for now.
let's consider what your your principal goals are. And
Mhm.
I would, from what you say, it's short-term is recreation, long-term investment. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it generating some, cash for my daughter when I'm gone, frankly. And I would like to, and I'd also like to see if what you think about doing something now that could generate some income on the property.
So in terms of your recreate, let's focus on the shortest term
Mhm.
issue. How are you able to recreate it on it now?
So the gentleman from whom we bought the property is deceased, but he did develop, some large roads through it, and we walk on it and snowshoe on it and cross-country ski on it now. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of property that I could wind through if I want to make smaller trails to make it more interesting and a little more
Yeah.
countryish, because the pretty wide roads he put in there, they're not just skid rows, they're rows like with an eye toward developing, I think, really.
Okay. And presumably they're relatively straight, sort of in the middle of the property. And are they, makes travel for a vehicle easy, but
Yep.
maybe not terribly appealing recreationally?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing in, I've been up there about 9 years and I've seen the forest trying to take over and growing in. I know that's not the greatest thing for the road, but it looks nicer.
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say that, what I said to Doug was that, from a financial standpoint, patience is going to be your best friend.
Mhm.
It's regenerated, it's growing. It sounds like if all of it is aspen, obviously that's a limiting factor because you don't have a lot of diversity. I'm guessing that one of the features of recreation that can be enjoyable is, to what extent are wildlife attracted to the property?
Mhm.
And again, without a lot of species diversity or size diversity, that's limiting. Any improvements or alterations to what you've got, whether it be, maybe creating, more perimeter trails or,
Mhm.
trails that visit sort of interesting features of the property, whether they be streams or, high spots or,
Yep.
cellar hole or, big old rocks that are just, the
Yep.
glacial erratics or something like that. Just to give you more variety and, visit more interesting places. Those opportunities are going to be somewhat limited to, your own labor, or to some extent, we could find contractors that could help with that.
Mhm.
Obviously, walking those sorts of trails can be fairly simple, in which case you're looking at something, relatively narrow, to the most part, probably avoiding water. But, those are sort of the simplest. And then you get into skiing and, my sense of Surrey is being on the coast, the snow depths are not all that great, pretty unpredictable.
I'm on Lower Patton Pond. I'm about 5-7 miles off the coast, so we do get snow.
No, I don't doubt that you get snow. But in terms of enough snow that you could smooth it, that the trail becomes smooth because of the depth of the snow.
Uh-huh.
And, so skiing, you might need to upgrade, a basic hiking trail a little bit more.
Mhm.
But anyway, so there's a number of things that, in terms of recreation that, might be possible to help in the short term. There's also, I believe through, some federal funding opportunities to help pay for some of those trails.
Yep. Oh, is that
Um,
right?
The U.S. Department of Agriculture has an office, well, right near you in Ellsworth, that you might want to chat with about what their opportunities are for helping develop trails. But
Okay.
there
I'll
is
do
some
that for
funding
sure.
there. They're right on Route 1.
Yep,
on
I've
the
seen 'em.
north.
I've seen them.
Um,
I never knew what they do in there, but I've seen them.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so that might be a way to help with the recreational thing. You know, from an investment standpoint, I think that you know, your potential income is years out.
Right.
So I think in the short term, you know, best pay attention to Ben Franklin and his penny saved is a penny earned.
Yep.
You know, minimize, and so your principal expenses at this stage of the game are going to be property tax and probably some basic maintenance.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want the roads to deteriorate
Right.
terribly. I mean, I don't know what the terrain is like, if it's up and down or relatively flat.
No, it's up and down. It goes about
Yeah,
200,
so-
220 feet or so.
You know, you want to pay attention to maybe some of the steeper sections to make sure that the water is diverted off the road.
Yep.
But anyway, I would see property tax, maintaining your boundary markers, you know, being the principal short-term expenses. So to the extent that you can minimize them, that's probably going to be your best, you know, investment.
Mhm. So just very quickly, so there were two specific questions I had about it. One is, I didn't mention, but there's about 50 acres of the property. So it's like 850 that's been clear cut. But about 50 acres is on the lake. So it has like real estate value. I'm not planning to develop anything, but it remains in tree growth, but it does have value. And why I mention that is because the former logger that owned the property and clear cut the 850 didn't clear cut the 50 on the lake. So I got some beautiful old trees on the lake, you know, some mature growth all along the lake, about 50 acres, like I say. Is there any way to generate some income from that, whether it's Christmas tree, tipping, things like that I hear about? So that's my first question, specific.
Well, I would say that the tipping options would be best probably in the clear cut area. I mean, as much popple as you have, I'm betting you also have some fir somewhere out there.
Yeah, we do. We do.
And those actually can be tended, you know, because if you can get them, I mean, what you want to do obviously in growing tips is get as much needle growth as possible and also close to the ground so that you can get at it. And so basically you can do sort of like an orchard. You can even top the trees for that matter. And, you know, focus on the, and this is on balsam fir, so space them out a bit. Yeah, you can certainly do that. And then, you know, in terms, and that is very short term.
Is that the kind of thing I bring someone in to help me with? Because I don't know what the heck I'm doing with that.
Yeah, well, I think that, you know, you're in the, you know, you recognize that you need some help, and whether it's something that you learn and do yourself or, you know, lease to, you know, wreath folks that will send a tipper in to get them.
So that's who I contact, or wreath company of some kind?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And there's quite a number of them down east, around you and farther east.
Okay. So I would just cold call them and see if they're interested in seeing my property and seeing if they want to send a tipper out.
Well, I guess I would identify potential areas first before you waste anybody's time wading through a bunch of popple looking for fir trees. But you know, if you can, you know, something, and so what you're looking for ideally is something that's accessible and has a preponderance of fir in it.
How big a tree would they need to make that useful to them?
Oh, not tall at all. 6, 8 feet.
Uh-huh.
Sounds like you've got probably plenty of them.
Yep.
If you have fur, but,
Yep.
and then from a management standpoint, you just want to space them out. So again, whether that's something that you have time for or something you get a contractor to help with, space them out because you want the sunlight to get in there so that you get good full branches worth of needles. But yes, that is an opportunity in the short term to generate some income that way.
Okay.
Harold, what did you say? You called them tippers?
Yeah, because what they're going to do is they're going to snap the tips off each branch.
And
And that's-
who, this is a logger type person?
No. This is well, they typically are suppliers to wreath companies.
Oh, okay.
And they go out there and yeah, just it's handwork. And instead of picking blueberries or beans, you're picking the tips off of fir trees.
Can I wade in? Can I wade in here with a question about that?
Yes, you may.
Well, I've got a lot of balsam fir, and I don't know what to do with it. And what do they pay for that when they come in? How does that work?
I don't know. I assume they pay by the pound.
I see. But what they harvest, okay.
Yeah. But I don't know specifics.
How ugly does that leave your tree when they do that to it? Is that going to be like an eyesore once they've done it?
Well, you don't want to denude the tree. The whole point is to do it. And I'm stepping a bit out of my expertise in terms of the technical, how much, but you can certainly talk to the folks at the Extension Service, or go online and talk to the Christmas Tree Growers Association, because there are plenty of them that grow trees, but also have access to tips, and how you go about contracting for them or selling them direct.
Mm-hmm.
So would that be a good first stop for someone who is really new at this and wants to explore the option?
Yeah,
The
I
tree
think that
Association?
Christmas Tree Growers is a good group, or the University of Maine Extension Service would be another
Okay, good.
option. The Forest Service might be, but I think you'd probably be better with the other sources first.
So Harold, when you talk about thinning out the trees, how far apart should these balsams be, the first?
Well, kind of like what I said to Doug, I mean, we're looking at smaller trees. I mean, the problem with taller trees is then the tips of the tree shades out the lower part, which is the accessible part, and you don't want to put ladders and all that business up to the tree. So you want to keep them short. So generally, again, sort of that 6 to 8 feet, because you want to be able to walk around them, and get tips from around the entire stem. And again, I don't know personally the percentage of tips that you should take in any given year, but you should be able to take tips each year. Just don't do it so heavily that you set the tree backwards.
Sure.
But anyway, so Todd, that's probably, short term, and especially your neighborhood. I think that there's plenty of wreath companies in Hancock and then down east in Washington that might be quite interested if you have fur, and then managing it as such.
Right.
But anyway, so
So
you
thanks for
said you had a
that.
second question as well.
I did. This might be too complicated, but I've been hearing a bunch about the carbon, somehow
Yeah.
getting paid to not do cutting.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
interested in that.
As are many people, including myself, and there's still a big uncertainty about it, but there appear to be quite a number of programs that are, on the cusp of being available in Maine. And so that one, I think we need to just stay tuned to. But I do have a client that has land similar to yours, heavily cut 10, 15 years ago. And that's what he's actually signing up for one, which I didn't realize was available in Maine yet, but
That's what I wanted to know. What's involved in signing up for one? I mean, once you get involved with the bureaucracy like that, it could be quite a
yeah.
problem.
So again, I don't know, because I didn't realize that was even available, but the one that there is, I think it's called NCX. But there's a number of programs. Nature Conservancy is working on some options, along with others. Let me see if I have that email from him that had the. Yeah, they're looking at the NCX program, and I'm
NCX.
not quite sure. Anyway, I'm gonna relay this to Jen, and she will circulate the instruction or the URL.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I'll do it now so I don't forget it. But so beg my pardon.
NCX.com. Yeah, I see it here. How to sell carbon credits with NCX. Now enrolling.
Yeah, and it sounded like there was a December deadline for maybe this initial. So anyway, Jen, I just sent, and you'll see there's an email chain in there, but embedded in it is an NCX URL. Anyway, which is more information than I have.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, so yes, there do appear to be, I mean, typically the carbon programs that have been utilized over the last number of years have been for much larger ownerships. Even Todd's 850 acres isn't enough.
Yeah.
They're typically, 5,000 acres and up. But there's a huge interest in these carbon programs for smaller landowners or owners with smaller acreages. So stay tuned. And to be perfectly honest, Maine Woodlands is investigating them. We're looking at both the larger one, a larger program for, given that we've got over 5,000 acres. And we also are looking at the smaller programs because we want to be able to model them for our members to illustrate, what are the benefits, what are the implications, what are we giving up by managing for carbon instead of other products. So stay tuned. But yeah, we have not. Anyway, this was news to me that came in just this week that there was a sign up program in Maine for this NCX program. So anyway, so that's an option. But Todd, you also have an opportunity with those 50 acres around the lake. I don't know to what extent. I'm guessing that while 800 acres were flattened and the 50 acres around the lake were not. I'm guessing though that he went through those 50 acres and plucked out all the valuable trees or the.
No, I don't think so. I don't think he did
really?
anything in there. Yeah, I don't see any stumps in there. It looks really.
Oh, interesting.
pristine.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say you do have an opportunity there. I mean, there's regulatory limits to whenever you're working within 250 feet of a great pond, which is 10 acres, which presumably yours is.
Yep.
But even I mean, typically within that 250 foot zone, you can cut up to 40% of the trees in a 10-year period. You know, so someone with a ownership objective as yours, I don't see, you know, 40% being a real problem.
No.
You know, and
So if
you
I
know,
want to
from-
keep that looking beautiful, I don't really want to, you know, I totally am interested in keeping that looking beautiful along the lake there. Is that, what would, I mean, what kind of, who'd be interested in coming in and harvesting something? It seems very small. Like I know the big, you know, 850 acres when they clear cut it, you know, there was a
Yeah,
lot to
right.
do. But now,
Um,
what do you do?
well, first thing I would do is, I mean, what did your forest management plan suggest be done there?
I'd have to go back and look at it,
Yeah.
but as far as.
I would certainly start there, and,
Cisco still?
you know, and talk with your forester
The one?
Really
about what
interesting.
the options are.
I've learned a lot.
Um,
Like you can talk to a wreath company, will come in and take your balsam fir.
That's what I was wondering,
And
yeah.
there are balsam fir farms where they just keep the trees 6 to 8 feet. So that they get plenty of sunlight and then they really grow a lot.
We may not have enough to make it worth it, because we've heard that, but. Right?
David, can you mute, please?
Yes,
Anyway, I'm thinking that's the background conversation that we're all hearing.
Yep.
Anyway, so Todd, I would talk with see what the management plan says, talk to your forester, but you know, Maine Woodlands has land in Ellsworth, and I mean, it's more than 50 acres, but I would, you know, aside from the fact that those are rocky neighborhoods, you know, there's no reason why you couldn't be doing harvesting on 50 acres. That's just not a prohibitively small property.
Yep.
You know, you get talking about acreage that Amanda has, that gets a little more tricky. But 50 acres is quite reasonable to think you could go in and do a selective harvest.
Right.
And you know, do that periodically, you know, every 15, 20 years.
And keep it looking good at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, don't be fooled that logging isn't you know, it's not a benign activity. You know, something happened.
Yeah.
So you probably aren't going to walk through there post-harvest and say, oh, wow, this looks way better than it did before. It may, depending on, but it's what you're familiar with. It's what you're comfortable with. It's what you're looking for in the woods that's important. And if the harvesting can do that, then you should be in good shape.
Thank you.
It looks like Amanda, you'd like to jump in?
You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so I think the woods I have, I'm not great at identifying trees, but I don't think it's been cut for 20 or 30 years. There's a good mix of things in there. There's a lot of fallen down dead stuff, and it's just kind of like violently haphazard and kind of impenetrable with, you know, stuff on the ground and just really hard to walk through. So I have a little baby electric battery chainsaw that's about 10 inches, so I can only take down really small things easily. And my plan was to just start walking through and chopping things down as I go. And so I have options along the way of, do I take down do I take down deciduous trees or coniferous trees? That's basically, you know, my plan. And then kind of what's the hierarchy if I have a choice between all the little trees I could take down, what do I start taking down more for forest health? And I mean, I guess just is it a good strategy in general to take down the little stuff and leave the big stuff, and, you know, what are the implications of that?
So what would you like to do with the woods?
I just want to be able to have one nice like looping path through. And then maybe eventually long term, it might be nice to get a piece of equipment there long term and slowly take things out for firewood. I don't need to. I think my goal is just to have it be easy for people to walk through, not a fancy trail, but just, something easier.
Yeah, well, I would bet with your electric chainsaw, you could do just what you're looking to do. In which case, your choice of which trees to deal with are the ones that are in the way. So, probably the best thing to do is, maybe go out in advance and figure out the route that you want to walk, down the middle, around the edge, find interesting features. And then just with the saw, clear whatever's in the way so that you can get around. And then you really don't have to worry about which species you're dealing with. It's just whatever's in the way. That's not to say that you couldn't even route your trail around things that are obstacles to make your life a little easier. Anyway, I would say that would be the first step, but that's going to be, a pretty helpful one, I would think. And then, when you're getting into, if let's assume that you've got your trail, what's the next thing you'd like to see benefit from your woods? You were saying forest health, and are you aware of any existing forest health issues that you have? Insects, diseases?
I don't know. We have the thing I've noticed, and maybe this is just because I'm near it, is, there's a cleared field and a stone wall. And I feel like slowly, even in the 2 years I've owned it, things closer to the clearing and the stone wall seem to be dying a little bit more. And
really?
I don't know what that is. Is it just, it was too open for them, or they got too exposed or got too dry or something? I don't know what is happening there.
I wouldn't think that was an
Yeah.
issue, because sunlight is generally an ally of plant growth, unless it was sort of suddenly opened up. But it sounds like that wasn't the case. That field's been there the whole time, and the trees have grown up beside it.
I think the field was cleared significantly and maybe like 7 years ago. So I don't know, 5 to 7 years ago. So maybe it was sudden for those
Yeah,
edge
I'm not
trees.
sure.
Okay.
And do you have any sense of what species are the ones that are suffering?
I mean, it's
Needled, leaf, broadleafed?
it's mainly needled trees, but some birches too, inexplicably. Yeah, there are birches, and I don't know if it's spruce or pine, but
Yeah.
short needled trees on the edges.
Yeah. No, sight unseen, I can't say what that issue is, but
Okay.
are you right on the coast in Rockport? Or,
No, I'm like 2 miles in, or
okay.
so.
Anyway, nonetheless, it's still a relatively harsh place to grow trees. You're close to the shore. The soils aren't all that deep typically. So it's sort of a tough neighborhood to grow really high quality trees. And I guess and I have to admit, your acreage limits your options too. The likelihood of anything generating anything beyond firewood are pretty limited. You're not going to get a logging crew in there to help with it. And yet if in developing this recreational trail, that might be the means of getting the firewood out also.
Right.
And in which case then, you're probably focusing on, what trees can grow best, and thus which trees are interfering with those trees' efforts to grow best.
Yeah.
And so you take out the poorer quality, the ones that are competing, and that those trees become your firewood. And, the oak that gets left behind, kicks out acorns for the critters, and, and it's a much better wildlife tree. I mean, that's probably the best you're going to be able to do on such small acreage is benefit area wildlife. So
Right.
in the end of the day, you've got your trail that you can recreate on. You've provided some features for area wildlife that will benefit the wildlife, and perhaps you, as you walk the trail, will then see more than you did before. But anyway, I guess that's what I see possible there.
Yeah. Thanks. So oak, what else should I preference versus see as more of a nuisance?
Well, probably on the coast there, you're looking at oak, white pine, and spruce being probably your better keeper trees. Presumably you'll have balsam fir, red maple, depending on how old the woods are, I'm not sure. But those would more typically be the poorer, shorter lived trees.
Okay. Yeah, and I have a lot of beech and birch too, I think, and some ash.
Oh, okay, okay. So you do have some variety. Yeah, so the beech has a health issue, although if you can grow it reasonably well, the beech nuts are very desired by wildlife. So the fact that even though the beech tends to be diseased, in a situation like yours, I don't see that it's anything to eradicate, because if you can get it up to the point where they're kicking out beech nuts, that's a real plus. So anyway, I mean, like I've said before with others, diversity is an important piece. I mean, for example, you're in a neighborhood where, hemlock woolly adelgid has arrived. Well, if an insect comes in or a disease comes in and wipes out a whole species, and that was the species that you were favoring on your woodlot, you don't really have time to grow a new forest. And yet, if you can keep it as diverse as possible, then it's going to be in a better position to handle if a species gets eliminated by chance or by some critter or disease coming through. So sounds like you've got some options.
Great. This is helpful.
I have a quick question, Amanda. Do you have a budding forest? So do you have neighbors with forests that abut your woods?
Yeah, there's a huge tract that's maybe 40 acres or so that was clear cut pretty recently. And then there's another tract on the other side that's maybe 15 to 20 acres that's in the same shape as mine.
Yeah, I have found other landowners who have smaller parcels, but understand that they, in connection with their neighboring parcels, are part of a bigger, 20, 30 acres, maybe more. So one of our members came to our event and she brought her neighbor to our event. And so it got me thinking a little bit about folks like you. It's important, it's going to be more and more that we're going to see smaller parcels owned because of, whatever subdevelopment or however land is getting restructured as, you know, transfers happen. So there may be, if you ever get to know your neighbor, you know, it may be an interesting conversation to talk about goals. And I don't know how easy that would be. I know it's a little tricky. People move to woods so they don't have to talk to neighbors. I understand that, but your woods are definitely part of a bigger, you know, parcel in
Yeah.
essence.
Yeah.
Anyway, please stay in touch with us about any of your issues.
Thanks.
So we're running out of time. Does anybody have a one last quick question before we sign off today? Betty, or Betty's not here. Looks like we've lost a few people. So Doug or David or Todd, last thoughts or questions before we sign off?
I want to thank you for this opportunity to check in.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Doug. I'm sorry I didn't put the name and the face together, but Doug, you were at the at the event Harold led in
Last
May
spring.
in Gray. So that was good to have you there. And I'm thinking we're going to do something similar in 2022. It's a
Oh,
you know,
good.
it's sort of an intro, but it did have a lot of substance. So it could be a good review for people who may have woods long term, but haven't, you know, thought a lot about management recently. And it's a good refresher. But yeah, and I sent a little note to Max saying that you sounds like you are following the course that he's suggested when he spoke to you. So
Well, I'm a neophyte, but I am attempting.
yeah, I think intentions and attempts are important. Well, terrific. Thank you everyone for attending, and we'll have Harold back again in early 2022 and talking about getting ready for spring. And hopefully everybody has a great rest of your week and enjoy the increasing winter weather and a good holiday at the end of the year.
Happy holidays.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
All right.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.